Good evening and welcome to News Review. The government and opposition this week crossed swords over the issue of power generation. The government claims the GST would increase costs of doing business in Gibraltar by at least 40% in respect of electricity. For its part, the GST calls for a debate on the appropriateness of a universal subsidy, asking whether it's right that the taxpayer should subsidise by 40% the electricity cost of a millionaire wishing to heat his pool. We spoke to both the Chief Minister and the Leader of the Opposition.
It would be completely untrue and unfair to say that we have failed, because I'll tell you what we have done, and I'll tell you what would have been the absolute failure. If I had received a report 10 years ago telling me that Waterport was going to fail at some stage soon, and certainly by 2013 it would have failed for sure, and I had done nothing, then it would be an absolute failure, and that is the failure of the previous administration. But if instead what I had done was look at what the cost of fuel is, look at the deal that the previous administration was looking to do, realize just how bad a deal it was for Gibraltar, and forget when Mr. Feetham says that the cost of 145 million was the whole cost of their power station. It wasn't. There are lots of other hidden costs there. And instead, I stop the process, I bring in temporary power, and I make sure that we do the right deal for the future generations of Gibraltarians that will rely on the new power station. Then that is actually exactly the right thing to do. And I'll tell you more about the process. The reclamation is not essential to the whole of the new power station as it is going to be. It's an essential part of rejigging that part of Gibraltar for the power station to be there. But the power station, work on the power station will start even before the reclamation has started or even finished.
Well, it's not solving the issue, because clearly we're spending, so far we've spent about £10 million in relation to those temporary power generators, but they're not solving the issue. Look, it's certainly true that if we're going to be looking at responsibility overall, that the GSD has to bear some responsibility, because we were in government for 16 years. I mean, I don't shirk away from that. What I think is wrong is for the Chief Minister really not to bear some responsibility for this and to just completely look backwards and to blame the GSD. I mean, the reality of the situation is, yes, we did receive a report 10 years ago, but in 2007 we took the decision to build the power station. And the only reason why the power station was not actually built in Lathbury Barracks was because we were embroiled in litigation and injunctions for several years. That's the only reason. But all the plans were in place, the finance was in place, and if the government had taken the decision, rather than to go it their own way, to basically continue with our plans, the power station would have been built by now, and these problems would have been a thing of the past.
In other news this week, on the first anniversary of the creation of the artificial reef off the runway, the opposition stated that removing the reef is not on its agenda, but added that any responsible government must act in the best interests of Gibraltar. This follows Chief Minister Fabian Picardo's criticism of opposition leader Daniel Feetham, who this week said he would be prepared to consider raising the submerged concrete blocks as part of a wider agreement with Spain that benefited Gibraltar.
Well, I can't envisage a set of circumstances at the present moment where we would be removing the reef. And indeed, I have actually said that the government had every single right to lay the reef. We wouldn't have done so, but the government had every right to lay the reef, because those are British Gibraltar territorial waters. And we can do in British Gibraltar territorial waters what we like, despite the fact that we wouldn't have done it. What I am saying, and what distinguishes myself from Mr. Picardo, is that whilst he says, and I think it's a populist statement that really serves absolutely no purpose, hell would freeze over before I remove the blocks, I say no. I will always act in accordance with the best interests of Gibraltar, in accordance with what benefits this community, and although I can't see a set of circumstances at present, and it's not on the agenda, I don't know what the future holds. That's my position.
Also this week, 3 Spanish socialist ex-parliamentarians who were very prominent at the time the Tripartite Forum for Dialogue was devised denounced the policy of the present Partido Popular government on Gibraltar. In a joint statement, José Caracao, Salvador de la Encina and Rafael Ramón singled out Foreign Minister José Manuel García Margallo and Algeciras Mayor José Ignacio Landaluce for the constant and deceitful smokescreen the PP deploys every day with regard to Gibraltar. They accused them of making hostages of residents on both sides of the frontier. The veteran PSOE politicians say the present crisis in relations was both avoidable and unnecessary, and they urge a return to dialogue on cooperation, leaving questions of sovereignty to one side. They also asked that the Gibraltar government make gestures of goodwill to the people of the Campo area. Meanwhile, the Chief Minister welcomed the comments and reiterated the UK and Gibraltar governments remain fully committed to the trilateral forum. However, given the current impasse, Mr. Picardo says both governments were also happy to support the proposals for ad hoc dialogue. According to the Chief Minister, the ex-parliamentarian's call for dialogue is a very welcome one. And he says the time has come to talk about what unites us and not to concentrate on what divides us. The Gibraltar Football Association this week revealed plans to propose a new design for the new football stadium after taking on board many of the criticisms and concerns. It also presented an environmental impact assessment. One of the recommendations given on board was that the stadium be sunk into the ground. The preferred venue continues to be Europa Point, but at the meeting of the Development and Planning Commission, it was revealed that the GFA would be presenting its assessment on alternative sites and that the government was also looking at alternatives.
The stadium project was discussed under any other business following this morning's meeting of the Development and Planning Commission, and it's estimated the plans for a new stadium could appear before the Commission in September or October following periods of consultation. Among the government projects presented this morning was the installation of a wave generator at the ammunition jetty by Dudley Ward Tunnel. The pilot project aims to provide energy to new developments on the east side. The Environmental Safety Group said it was excited about the project, which it described as a significant step. For its part, the Ornithological and Natural History Society said it was a landmark move.
This is wonderful for Gibraltar, wonderful for our commitments to renewable energy. We've got responsibilities at European level to do that, and if this works and we're able to use one of our biggest assets, the sea, to generate our power, well, that would be wonderful for Gibraltar in all sorts of different ways.
How confident are you of success?
I'm fairly confident. It's a fairly new technology, but it has been tested elsewhere, so we are quite confident that this is going to work.
Another government proposal was an extension to the hospital courtyard for the hospital's expansion. Works are expected to take 2 years, and the addition meet mid to long-term demand. The recently announced works to the Upper Rock were also placed before the DPC, as well as proposed alterations and improvements to create a dog park at the Alameda Gardens.
This will mean that we will be able to accommodate all our services which are tight for space. There's a tightness of space in St. Bernard's, there's tightness for space at the primary care centre and other areas, so we will be able to reconfigure what we do with our space. It will also allow us to really look at the possibility of repatriating such activities as MRI scanning and so on, because it's all very well saying, right, let's bring it here, but where shall we put it? So this will allow us expansion and will make, from the point of view of space, it will make the GHA virtually future-proof.
One of the projects in front of the Commission today has been a dog park at Alameda Estate. Will you be looking at changing legislation should this be required? Because, of course, the Alameda Gardens are protected, as we know.
Yes, this is an area of the Alameda Gardens which runs along the Grand Parade, which will be developed to encourage dog owners to use it. And clearly, because at the moment dogs are prohibited from the whole of the Alameda Gardens, for that particular area we will have to make sure that we legislate accordingly so that anybody who then takes their dogs there is not in breach of the law.
Despite a manifesto commitment, government projects continue to go before the DPC for advice and not approval.
I think I should say, first of all, that the bringing government projects here for guidance and advice is working. The DPC makes recommendations, and in many cases, for example, in relation to the extra floor at Glacis and Laguna Estates, and in relation to the car park that was going to be built in front of the Sunburn, on the Sunburn reclamation area, the government took the advice of the DPC. That's happening continuously on many cases, and we think that it's worked. It works. Today we've had 11 government projects come before the DPC, not 1 or 2, 11. And to answer your question, the government has included this in the new Town Planning Act. So when the Act is finally in a position to be published, the Act itself is practically ready. It's only the regulations which are now being drafted. Once all that has been done, the legislation will then be published and go to Parliament in the normal way.
On private projects, the Commission heard a proposal for the conversion of the former St Joseph's School building into 4 apartments and the construction of 8 new buildings to provide 16 residential units. As it stands, the project offers parking facilities for 44 cars and 24 mopeds and includes a walkway and landscaping and improvement works to Witham Cemetery. Although it has received outline approval, changes in the new design meant the proposal was sent back to the drawing board. A project that was also sent back to be revisited was a drive-through takeaway on the site of the ex-Mobil petrol station in Limewall Road.
And we'll be back with more of this week's stories after the break. Welcome back. The Royal Gibraltar Police is investigating a number of small cases where social media has been used to make comments considered offensive or which may lead to racial or religious hatred. The comments appear to focus on current events in the Middle East. The RGP says action will be taken against offenders and asks administrators of Facebook groups to report any comments posted that they're concerned about.
Well, first and foremost, the Royal Gibraltar Police is all for freedom of speech, and that is part and parcel of what we want. What we certainly can't tolerate, and we won't tolerate, is those comments that are put on social media which can become very offensive, religiously or racially.
And what has the RGP done in respect of this? Have any individuals been arrested?
Well, we currently have a number of investigations in place. We have an individual at this present moment in time under arrest, and this is as a result of placing certain comments on social media. These are your typical Facebook, Twitter accounts. What we are certainly doing is monitoring these different accounts on a daily basis, ensuring that people are practicing the right processes for freedom of speech, but certainly at the same time not offending anyone. And I like to remind people that whatever they do post on social media, they may think it's not offensive, but it certainly may be offensive to certain parts or certain people in our community. And Gibraltar is a very tolerant community, and we work and live together in a society which is the envy of many. But at the same time, we can't tolerate those individuals that put these posts certainly offending certain people in our community.
And what will happen in respect of that individual who was arrested? Will you be pressing charges or just warning that individual not to post those comments again?
Well, like I said, this is sub judice. I can't comment on it. There are a number of investigations, in actual fact, not only just the one. So we could see further people coming into our station to answer certain questions from us. What the Royal Gibraltar Police stance is, it's a zero-tolerance policy on postings that could be offensive to any members of our community, maybe through it being racially or religiously hatred comments.
And some individuals will be wondering where the lines cross in respect of freedom of expression, freedom of speech and inciting hatred. What are the RGP's thoughts on this?
Well, I think people have to look at their ethical and moral values first and foremost, and if you start them with that, that gives you a very good guideline. So I ask people if they're going to be doing anything from their keyboard, think what it would, what reaction they could cause if they were actually be doing it in public, face to face, and then again, your ethical, moral values come into it.
And speaking of, perhaps stepping away from behind the computer and doing things in public, there have been reports and discussions on social media, people commenting on the fact that they've seen people driving around with flags, be it either Israeli or Palestinian, to do with the current conflict. What would be the RGP stance be on that, if that were happening, and is that happening? Has there been any report on that?
Again, the Royal Gibraltar Police promotes freedom of speech, like I said, and we encourage people to do so. We would never want people to shy away from this, but what people have to be is sensible and at the same time be cognizant of people's feelings and views at the time. Everything can be done as long as they measure it properly.